Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another video. This is going to be the last video before Nationals, and today we're talking about the top meta strategies for each color. This is pretty much a brand new format going into Nationals. We were supposed to have a couple tournaments with set 15, but the set got delayed to be released the weekend of Nationals. So this is going to be more of like a prediction based video more than anything. We don't have too much data to go off of for this current set, so I will go through my thoughts with you guys. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell so you don't miss a video, and if you guys want to help support the channel, many ways to do so down in the description. But today, guys, if you want to get prepped for events like Nats, other events, now the new season will be starting after Nats, make sure to check out the Patreon down in the description. You can read the articles that I have posted there, or you can inquire about coaching if you are interested in that. Anyways, we will get started. Like I said, preliminary kind of just prediction type video because we don't have perfect data to go off of for set 15, but I will be using some set 14 analysis to kind of go into this. So the first color we have is blue. I don't think this really surprises anyone, but Soul Striker is definitely going to be the top dog, at least as far as my predictions go for set 15 blue. In the beginning, or I guess in the middle of set 14, when we had the emergency ban list, SS4 Vegeta kind of took over, but those were really best of one events where SS4 Vegeta is heavily favored unless you come across Cell Surge, which is by far this deck's worst matchup. Cell Surge naturally does well into blue, but Soul Striker probably has the ability to play into Cell Surge the best because he's such a flexible leader and because you're able to main deck unisons that draw cards, main deck Saiyan Instincts, stuff like that. But regardless, like besides just Cell Surge matchup, Soul Striker is easily the most flexible blue leader just because of that energy untap. You get to just make more plays than most other decks because you get to untap all that energy. So as far as blue is concerned in Nationals, I suspect Soul Striker to be the most popular blue deck. I also think it might be the most popular deck. There's one other deck that I think might kind of contend that spot. We'll talk about in a bit. But yeah, Soul Striker, easily top dog. Blue is hurt a bit by the loss of Galactic Buster, but I think it's making up for that in other ways, whether you're playing mono blue or some sort of blue color combination. I think both options are pretty viable. As far as the other two picks though, SS4 Vegeta and SS Kaba, Vegeta, I think, can do okay in best of 3. It's obviously very, very hindered in best of 3. One of the main reasons for that is that you're playing a super hyper turbo ramp deck and you're usually going into Super 17 turning the tide. But in best of 3, your opponents can be sideboarding Jiren Survival of the Fittest. So turning the tide is not going to be as reliable in a best of 3 as it will be in best of 1. But we did get some new tools like the new Kale 5 drop that I think is very, very good in Vegeta because you're ramping very quickly. You'll get the maximum effect of that Kale earlier than a deck like Soul Striker, for example. I think really if you want to play SS4 Vegeta at Nationals or in any best of 3 really, I think you still have to just sideboard non-blue cards, mainly like Deborah or possibly Saiyan Instincts. And against Cell Surge, you just have to not become a ramp deck. Like that's kind of the reality of the thing. Most often, even if you still do a damage, you'll still probably flip a blue card. And the times you don't flip a blue card, you just have to kind of deal with it because you really need those anti-hand control cards to play SS4 Vegeta, to play blue really in general. Kaba, I think, is a deck that really has to prove itself. I know a lot of people are very, very hyped on it. I don't see it being better than Soul Striker, but I think it's still a solid blue/blue-yellow deck. You do get some additional energy, mostly defensively because of the leader. The ability to free combo a blue-yellow really helps with your arrival, although that requires you sticking a unison on the board. And while hit unison is an absolutely insane card, it is only a two energy +1 unison, and those are pretty easy to remove by today's metagame standards. So yeah, basically to sum up, blue's top dog, Soul Striker, SS4 Vegeta, and Kaba. I do expect to see them in Nats, but they do have a bit of a ways to prove themselves. Next up, talking about black, Gogeta is by far and away the best black deck you can be playing if you're looking to play black. There are some other rogue picks here and there. You've got like Hachiak, you've got Black Sin, but these decks have not proved themselves, at least as far as like set 14 is concerned. Black Sin, I can't really talk about that much because it just got some new cards in set 15, so that'll be an interesting one to see, but I don't expect that to be more than rogue tier. So as far as top meta strategy for black, you got to be playing Gogeta Xeno. There is a decent barrier to entry because of the price of Gogeta thwarting the Dark Empire, but still, I mean, for Nationals, that's not really going to stop anyone who wants to play what they think is the best deck. So Gogeta is the other deck that I think may be the most popular deck at Nationals just because of how good it is. There aren't a ton of great aggressive decks in the format, but Gogeta Xeno is definitely the best aggro deck in my opinion, and because of the set 15 ban list, defensive mid-range just naturally got weaker. So this being the best aggro deck, again, in my opinion, makes this a lot better because of the, you know, now new weaknesses of those blue and blue-yellow defensive mid-range decks. So again, I think if you're playing black, I think Gogeta Xeno is the top dog. The True Fighting Spirit cards are very good. All the Gogetas are very good. The deck is pretty RNG dependent though, so I can definitely see Gogeta Xeno players tilting because they, mill terribly the first 2 times they activate their leader effect. I can definitely see a world where that happens. So while I suspect it to be super popular, I don't know how many are actually going to transition into Top Cut, again, because of that RNG factor. We're going to Nationals, we're playing a long tournament, probably 7 to 8 rounds. So with that in mind, consistency usually wins out over power, and Dragon Ball is just generally a very consistent game, but Gogeta again does add that element of RNG where, like, if you activate your leader mill effect the first turn and you warp like 3 Gogetas and 2 super combos, yeah, you've got Vegeta fusion fodder in the warp, but it is super not ideal to have warped a lot of your boss monsters and 2 of your super combos. That also gives your opponent a lot of information as well. Regardless though, that's just kind of the downsides of the deck. The deck is still very powerful. Again, in my opinion, the top dog for black for sure. And then we come to green, which is carried by a deck much like black is, and that's going to be Cell Surge. This is by far and away the best green deck. There's really no one disputing that. This is probably the #1 boogeyman going into Nationals, and I think that people are going to be prepped for this deck with a lot of hate. So if you're a Cell Surge player, I'd get ready for that, and there are plenty of ways that Cell Surge can answer its own hate cards, which makes the deck still good in a best of 3. It's not really like the SS4 Vegeta situation where your boss monster is auto answered by Jiren and there's not a ton you can do about it without a crazy amount of setup. Cell Surge though can answer its sideboard hate with sideboard hate of its own. It's basically siding hate against the hate, right? So Cell Surge can do that. Doesn't cost it too much in terms of opportunity cost and in terms of sideboard space, so that's pretty good. But again, I do think that a lot of players have been testing against this deck. I think a lot of players are going to have a plan against Cell Surge, but that doesn't mean it's not the best green deck. There are other good green decks as well. I think Green Gotenks is one that's been picking up a lot of popularity over the past few weeks. It did very well at the Pro Support TCG weekend that I was commentating just the other week, and King Cold is one of those green decks that you kind of always expect to see, not in like high volume, but you definitely wouldn't be surprised if you played against a King Cold. That's just kind of how that deck has landed in the meta. But those two are definitely very rogue picks. This is going to be your top meta pick for green for sure. And then for red, now these are all rogue picks. I wouldn't call any red deck particularly meta right now, so I really don't have a choice but to go over what I think are going to be rogue red picks, but I still think they're strong. Jiren aggro, red Broly, and some sort of U7, whether that's going to be Gohan or Vegeta, that's kind of interchangeable in that slot, I think are going to be decks that are played, but again, not at super high numbers, right? It did do very well. Red did very well at the Pro Sport TCG weekend once again. That was only a set 14 tournament, but it was with the set 15 ban list. As we know, there's not a ton of set 15 stuff that's going to impact the meta in a crazy way. There are super good like singleton cards, but as far as archetypes go, they're not really impacting the meta. Like Red Broly in set 15, Red Goten in set 15 are probably not better than these decks in my opinion, and Red doesn't really have too many great generic tools at a set 15, so this is pretty much what you're stuck with for Red. But I do think as far as aggro goes, Red is the next best color underneath Black, and Red has more options than Black does, at least for aggro. So again, you've got your Jiren, which can obviously be very aggressive, goes very wide on the board with dual attackers and whatnot. Their boss monster is also very powerful, a huge 8-drop that you're dropping as early as turn 3, and the leader also swings for big damage. Red Broly is a deck that people have been scared of for a long time, even though it's never been super overbearing, but it's still a matchup that you want to be prepared for because the deck does very unique, powerful, and scary things. Goes wide, not quite as wide as Jiren, especially with the Planet Vampa errata, which definitely reins the deck in a little bit, but still, they're playing really big battle cards for very cheap, taking your hand away, albeit temporarily. But if they're killing you on turn 3, temporary hand rip doesn't really matter if you lose the game without those cards in your hand. It might as well have been permanent hand rip at that point. So you do definitely want to be very mindful of Broly. And then Red U7, just kind of working off the backbone of Goku Divine Presence. That card is very powerful. Deflect can't be removed the turn that they play it by conventional means, so you do want to be very wary. And you got just the really good generic red staples that are kind of just good in every format. You got Broly Crown Retribution, you got Violent Rays for the Saiyan decks, you got King Vegeta's Imposing Presence, Testing the Opposition, all very good cards that you want to look out for. These red decks are somewhat tied to archetypes, but those types of generic cards are pretty much playable in all these decks with the exception of King Vegeta's Imposing Presence. So red, again, I don't think it's going to be super popular, but I do think you should expect to play like maybe 1 or 2 in your Swiss rounds. And the final color we're talking about today, guys, is yellow. I think yellow is the color that has the most to prove. Obviously, Icarus took the biggest hits on the set 15 ban list. So the question is the deck going to show up and do really well, or is the deck going to not show up and not do so well, or is the deck going to show up in high numbers and just not convert into top cut? Those are kind of the three options we have there, because Icarus, while it did take a big hit with the set 15 ban list, for that tournament we had with Pro Sport TCG Weekend, it didn't have its new set 15 tools, and that is a really big thing for Icarus. There are a lot of really good blue-yellow cards in set 15. The question is going to be, though, how is Icarus going to be able to adapt? Have people perfected their builds where they're very comfortable with it, like they were with Violent Rush Bojack and full power Zamasu Eliminator? That's what I think Icarus really has to prove that weekend. I think another solid yellow pick is Sin Shenron. Again, I don't expect a ton of this deck to be there, so I might consider it more rogue than actual like meta, just in terms of representation, but I think the deck is very powerful. So it's one you're going to want to have answers for, maybe answers for the big 9-drop blocker. Luckily, they can't do the crazy turn 2 Cell Xeno stuff anymore, but Cell Xeno is still something you really have to worry about, because games are generally going in turn 5. Like, even if you're playing an aggro deck up against Sin, they're so defensive, especially with their 9-drop blocker, that they can stall the game out to 5 relatively easily. So you want to make sure you're prepared for that. Again, I don't think it's going to be super popular, but I do think it will be there. You may play against one in your Swiss rounds, if anything. But overall, guys, those are my thoughts for the top of the meta going into Nationals, which starts tomorrow. I hope to see you guys there. If you guys are there, definitely come say what's up to me. Looking forward to meeting you guys, and I'll see you in the next video.